I wanted to say that for me, and I've played since I was a small child, I haven't thought of music in terms of coming from a part of my body. When I thought, just prior to today, well, where is it coming from? In other words, from a young age, I went to hear performances of world-famous musicians. I sat beside my teacher, and we heard these world-class pianists. Sometimes they would take me to play for them. Often they would take me backstage to meet them. But I was always hearing, people who dedicated their lives to playing beautiful music. Most of my study was always preparing for the next competition. When I was 9 years old, I started competing, and I entered up to 4 competitions every year. So what sort of became part of my subconscious was, well, how do you shape music so that it's interesting and it's beautiful and it's enticing? How do you give it depth? How do you give it, beauty? And it has to do with, well, when does the music just crescendo, or when does it die down, to nearly nothing? And when is it explosive? All those qualities, I call it phrasing. I learned how to phrase the music. And when I feel it, I feel it in a very big part of my body. I feel it just emanating from just all of this area and into my arms. But where it's coming from, to the best that I can describe it, is from all these many, many experiences of my past, of having heard beautiful music performed. But I don't know what would be a good thing at this point, what would be helpful, or I'm not sure where to go from here. I think I told you a little bit about my background and the career I'm about to embark on. So I'm going to be quiet for a while now and try to listen and absorb.
That was so robust.
It's funny, I shouldn't have attempted. That was something where I would have played better had I warmed up. It's like it was a little too tricky a thing to take on.
Oh, sounded great.
But I was so inspired, I wanted to play it. But the other song, I played it 10 times better than when we started the session. I felt there was just so much more depth to it. Just so much more. It's just everything meant more. Everything just. But I was so moved to just taking the time. I haven't done that, not with any piano. So it just blew me away to feel that really for the first time in all these years, never doing that, and that's just so true. It's so true. I'm going to do that with my piano at home, because I didn't. There wasn't. What can I say? I feel like, I've tried to put into words, I feel that Gary has this heightened sensitivity way beyond most human beings. It's just, and you've studied with masters, and you've studied it from different angles, and you've learned in teaching it to others. Your understanding's gone even deeper. And I just haven't had any of that type of experience. But they just, like I said, it's just a whole different perspective that I've never known. I've never done any martial arts. I have such admiration for things like when I see Tai Chi. I think it's so beautiful. I don't know a thing about it. But I just have such reverence for these things also that have been around for thousands of years. Like I've always thought acupuncture must be, I just esteemed it like any kind of, any medicine, and but my experience just hasn't been, although I'm half Japanese, it's really, I've not been exposed to any of that sort of thing, that type of thinking. It requires an open-mindedness, certainly, which I admire, and
But I have an extra night.
I've just been too, I don't know if mainstream is the word or what. Okay, I was wanting to share that another challenge I faced as a pianist is that for me, the pianos are all so different. The challenge that I had just a minute ago in playing, sometimes I was striking a key and no sound came. So the amount of energy it takes to produce the sound is different with every piano. With Jimmy's piano, and for that matter, with many grand pianos, you have to strike the keys harder. Now, at the opposite end is something like a keyboard. Just a very light touch. The keys aren't weighted, and it takes far less effort to produce a sound. So for me, it was throwing me. Sometimes I was striking the key. It was completely depressing, but the sound wasn't coming. And another thing, everything sounded loud to me. I really couldn't. And that's something that comes with getting to know the instrument. Now, that's something that what can I say? I think I'm a perfectionist, and I think in my early training that was a plus. I mean, I was playing for competitions and learning everything so that you wanted to play it perfectly. The best thing was when you didn't make a single mistake, you know? Do I have the luxury of that? I can't even think, of when I will have that luxury to approach music in that way. So I just want to do the best with what I have. The time that I have to work on something, I just want to bring it to the highest level.
So there's many aspects of performance, whether it's performing arts or other types of performance. We have the training that goes with it, or we could call that the technical aspect of performance. It's an area where you saying like you're trying to reach perfection in the technical aspects. We also in the arts have the idea that we want it to be an expression of who we are, or we might be trying to express a character or a feeling, but it be through us. So that there's that expressive aspect of arts as well as the technical aspect. And then there's also the connective aspect of the arts, in that we want to connect to others. And that connection could be the expression, that they can receive the expression that we're trying to portray. We may connect so that they can feel a certain experience, but that experience would be from us or through us. And another part of connection is the idea of oneness, that we can share that moment together. So what we're going to be beginning today is the idea of expressing ourselves, or what's inside us, and then we'll proceed to using that as a connective force. So we'll be working with biodynamic forces that are within us. And if it's natural, as soon as we do it correctly, we should get a result. So because it's biomechanics or biodynamics, we should feel something immediately, as opposed to when you have to repeatedly train. Because if it's within us as humans, and we're doing that thing as humans, then it should work. It's not going to be something that we have to keep doing over and over and over again to see if it'll work. If we do it correctly, it should work because it's a part of our human dynamics. A little later on, when we explain it more, we'll show that in little babies and kids up to about the age of 2, they do a lot of this stuff naturally. And since we're on the topic of little babies or little kids, the movement that a mother does when she picks up a baby, or when they reach and pass the baby, and the way they bring the baby to them, is using the same body dynamics of connectiveness that we're going to be teaching. I said that to reinforce the fact that what we're doing is something that's already within us. And a lot of times gifted people, if you ask them what they're doing, they don't know. They say, this is just how I do it. And one of the difficulties is gifted people sometimes can't teach other people the giftedness because they're not exactly sure what the body dynamics are. So what we're going to look at is some of the body dynamics that we believe produce giftedness type of behavior, and then if we can do those same body mechanics, then we should see in our performance the same giftedness, or at least something close. So I'll start with a little story, is that to kind of get us familiar with the area that we're going into, is that in the Eastern arts or Asian arts, when they're doing their studies, they take a piece of the master and they repeatedly copy it and trying to get closer and closer to being able to duplicate what the master does.
Is this a movement?
It could be in movements, and it's also in the arts.
In the calligraphy?
Like calligraphy or Sunni, the painting. So this is a story about this master painter in his class, and he had this student for years. And the student was trying to copy this bamboo piece with bamboo leaves, and one of the leaves was bending down, right? So he's doing it repeatedly for years, and improving. And finally, he got to the point where he thought that he had it exact. Right? So he looked at his bamboo leaf, compared it to the master bamboo leaf, and this is the same. So he goes to the master and says, "Look, I think I've got it. Look at this leaf." The master looks at it and says, "That's good. Keep continuing. You're getting close." And then the student got a little perturbed at the master and said, "No, you're wrong. This is exact." Right? So the master just looked at the student and said, "You don't understand. This is not the same." And the student says, "All right, you draw one of these leaves then, if you think you can do better." So the master gets his brush, paints the leaf, and the student looks at the master's leaf, puts it next to his leaf. He says, "They look the same." "What do you mean?" He says, "They look the same." And the master says, No, they're completely different. And then the student, very disrespectfully, I might say, says to the master, "Well, you tell me, what's different? They look the same." And the master looks at the student and says, "My leaf is ready to spring back up." And that's that's the giftedness. It's to make that leaf look like it's going to spring back.
So it didn't look stagnant. It looked like it had been bent, but it was about
to come back up. Right? So there was an energy flow there, somehow that depicted it. And sometimes you'll see like the bird that's alighting onto a branch. Right? And you know it's coming down because there seems to be this motion of down. Right? And it's like, well, how do you put that in? Or how can you look at a painting of a face like the Mona Lisa? And is it a smile? Is it a grin? Is it mischief? What is it? And yet, if you look at that Mona Lisa, you notice she's holding her breath.
Oh.
Right? But then if you look at another painting, in most paintings, you see the people are breathing in. They're not holding their breath. We were in this old Roman Catholic church in Philadelphia. And they have a lot of statues. And every statue but one, the person was breathing in.
Interesting.
If you look in the Greek sculptures too, it's the same thing. You'll notice they're portraying, most of the time, an in-breath. It's not static. It's not holding the breath. It's not an exhale. So the thing is, now how can you put that feeling of energy into something? Even when you're working in 2 or 3 dimensions, because this is another dimension, and yet it is there.
So this is beyond 3 dimensions.
So we're talking about something different,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
But it's there, and people are doing it. So once we think about it, then we see it, right? So first we have to be aware it's there, and then we begin to see these things. So as we continue, we're going to get on projecting from different areas, and we'll be working with a lot of different visualizations too, because that's another dimension that we can pass on. So it becomes technical, but it's the technical aspect of what is making expression, or it might be the technical aspect of what is making connectiveness. So sometimes when a person is performing a particular piece, it makes people cry. You can feel it in that person. So how does that happen? But we know it does, right? Or the joyful, or joy. So what we want to do is see, how are these things created? Well, we know how they're created. It's within us as people. But then how are they conveyed, and can we be able to manipulate these things or develop these things? So it turns out that our method that we're going to do is, first we have to feel it and have it within ourselves.
And what do you mean by it? We have to have...
The dynamics and the energy within ourselves.
The dynamics and the energy.
It has to be within ourselves so we can be aware of it, or what it feels like. So if you never felt extreme sorrow, right, you can't portray extreme sorrow. Right? But if you know extreme sorrow, and you look at somebody grieving, you know what that person is feeling. Right? So what we're going to be doing all along is, first we're going to develop it or feel it within ourselves, and then if it's natural and part of us as humans, then as soon as we do it in the correct manner, then something should happen. Because it's just dynamics. Right? You do it and you get the result. So we're going to first work on ourselves so we can then do it. So what I'm saying is, the master that made the leaf look like it's bent and ready to spring back up could feel that. And now how did he put it into that drawing to make it look like it was ready to spring up? So what I'm saying is that he could feel it. He became that leaf. And somehow there's this dynamics of energy goes on that when he does something or paints it, it puts that energy or that feeling into it. It's just like looking at the work of a great master in the art history book, and then going up to the museum and seeing the real thing. There's a difference of dynamics that are portrayed. And that's what we're going to do. So we're going to get to know ourselves in a different way and start to work with different energy dynamics in new or different ways. And we're going to then apply that to the music for expression or connectiveness. And our bodies are just wonderful things. We were marvelously created, right? And so we're going to just begin with just a typical movement. And we'll just use a stepping movement, just stepping back and forth. So we'll just move to the side a little bit, and we'll just step and forth like we normally do. And then we'll step with different types of energy dynamics, right? And the easiest one to learn we'll step with an inhale or step with an exhale and see what a holding your breath does, because breathing is energy, right? And then we'll see what that does, and then we'll see how some of the dynamics of our different muscles work too, and then see how breathing in or out or holding our breath affects the dynamic of different muscle pairs.
Okay, would Would you say that last one again?
Okay. Then we'll see how different energy dynamics are affected by the different muscle pairs. So the one we'll do today is that there's muscles that go along the top of your arm into your shoulder, right? And there's also muscles that go along the bottom of your arm. They don't go into your shoulder, they go down to your chest and stomach. So we have two different muscle pairs. A high one that goes top of the arm muscles into the shoulder, and we have the lower one that goes from the bottom of the arm, but that goes into the chest and down to the stomach. Right? And it turns out that the two little fingers work by the lower arm muscles, and the other two fingers, the index and middle finger, go along the top of the arm. All right? Yeah, so we're going to see how those dynamics.
Thumb's totally independent.
Well, actually, it does a little of both, but mostly it's with the lower, connected more with the lower finger. But it does work a little bit with both, but it's more lower finger
The
than.
thumb is more this with the fourth and fifth?
Yeah. But it actually connects. Apparently, there must be some intertwining of muscles for the thumb too. But anyway, we're just going to look at those dynamics and see, because in the arts, usually, especially the music, you're using your hands. So the more you can figure out different things to do with your fingers, right? Or how different dynamics affect your hand and fingers, that's just going to affect the way you play. And that will give us an addition to our technical, right? We can work technically in new areas to build on top of what we already know. And our expression, we could also work with these because you express with your hands, right? And then it turns out that our connective ability will also be a factor of all these things as well. Okay? So that's where we're starting. We're just going to do a couple steps, work with the inhale and exhale, and then start to see how it affects our hands, because that's what we're doing is piano playing. And then see how it connects to us as a person, so that we can then use these energy flows to go from us as a person into our hands, and just like the leaf that sprung back up, it would go into the piano keys for you, or what you're holding. And then, if you could see that on the energy of the leaf springing back up, you should be able to hear it in the way the notes are played. How does that sound?
Oh, it sounds fantastic.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to stand up and we're just going to work with a simple base body movement, just so we can start getting the idea. And the idea will be seeing different areas that we can use, manipulate to get different results.
Beautiful.
Wow.
That was so robust.
It's funny, I shouldn't have attempted. That was something where I should, I would have played better had I warmed up. It's like it was a little too tricky a thing to take on.
Oh, sounded great.
But I was so inspired, I wanted to play it. But the other song, I played it 10 times better than when we started the session. I felt there was just so much more depth to it. Just so much more. Everything meant more. Everything just. but I was so moved to, just taking the time. I haven't done that, not with any piano. So it just blew me away to feel that really for the first time in all these years, never doing that. And that's just so true. It's so true. I'm going to do that with my piano at home. Because I didn't, there wasn't. What can I say? I feel like, I've tried to put into words, I feel that Gary has this heightened sensitivity way beyond most human beings. It's just, and you've studied with masters, and you've studied it from different angles, and you've learned in teaching it to others, your understanding's gone even deeper. And I just haven't had any of that type of experience. It's just a whole different perspective that I've never known. I've never done any martial arts. I have such admiration for things like when I see Tai Chi. I think it's so beautiful. I don't know a thing about it, but I just have such reverence for these things also that have been around for thousands of years. Like I've always thought acupuncture must be, I just esteemed it like any kind of, any medicine, and, but my experience just hasn't been, although I'm half Japanese, it's really, I've not been exposed to any of that sort of thing, that type of thinking. It requires an open-mindedness, certainly. I feel like, can I recreate this magic? I hope so.